for working Bermudians and did not increase taxes on business in Bermuda. It was a budget focused on economic growth, as that is what Bermuda needs, sustainable economic growth. The success of our strategy is evident. The economy is growing. In 2022, GDP is expected to grow between 3.4 and 3.9%, reaching pre-pandemic levels. There has been growth in employment, with 402 new jobs created in 2022. 230 of those new jobs were in international business, with 119 of those new jobs in international business being filled by Bermudians. The growth of jobs in international business is an indicator of continued expansion of that sector, with 812 new companies being formed in 2022. The international business sector demonstrated its resilience during the COVID-19 pandemic and continues to expand, with 591 additional jobs since 2019. And the 2021 GDP report saw the strongest growth in international business in 15 years. Bermuda's other significant pillar, tourism, is also rebounding. Tourism spending doubled in 2022, and we are now expecting a record cruise season in 2023. This budget recognizes that creating the right environment for Bermuda to remain attractive for international business is important, but it is equally critical to provide support to local business and relief for residents. As a result of the changes proposed in this budget, payroll taxes are being reduced for 86% Bermuda workers, and there are no businesses in the country that will see their employer payroll tax increase this year. For a small business, there will be a reduction in their payroll tax liability by as much as 43%. Self-employed farmers and fishermen will be exempted from employer payroll taxes. Wages and benefits paid to employees while on maternity or paternity leave will also be exempt for the employer. This budget takes into account the financial challenges experienced by employees, particularly those earning lower levels of income. With the changes made to payroll tax rates, all workers earning less than $132,000 annually will pay less payroll tax than last year. For some residents, there'll be a reduction of payroll taxes by 66%. It's important to note that since 2017, workers earning $40,000 have paid a combined $7,000 less in payroll taxes. If we look at the median income in Bermuda, which is at $66,000, those persons will be paying $4,500 less in taxes combined since the time that the PLP has come to office. And extending these reductions is important given the inflationary pressures that workers are having to address. With these changes, the government is once again bearing true to its mantra of building a fairer Bermuda and doing that through our system of taxation. In addition to these impactful changes in payroll tax, the statement highlighted the future plans for Morgan's Point. This project has been a source of significant drain on the public purse, which was a fallout from the failure of the previous government to properly secure the guarantee on that site. Where the previous administration gave a guarantee for most of the funding and due to the nature of the agreements, assumed most of the risk. Having assessed a number of various options, Cabinet has now approved a reimagined plan that will see the site appropriately converted with 101 residential units planned for phase 1, ranging from entry-level to high-end, with seniors housing to be added in phase 2. There will also be an amenity village with restaurants and retail businesses as a gathering point for food, shopping, entertainment, and leisure activities. The new plan will promote access for all with many opportunities in line with key government goals for the provision of more housing and support for small and medium-sized enterprises. Since returning to office in 2017, this government has developed and implemented a prudent fiscal and debt management strategy to achieve a balanced budget and, in the long term, reduce government debt. Although in 2020, additional debt funding had to be secured to address the COVID-19 pandemic, while after making good on the One Bermuda Alliance's failed Morgan's Point project, the government has still put making balancing the budget a priority. And we are pleased to report that deficit targets have reduced every year since 2020. With the continuing post-2020 economic growth, I'm encouraged to see current year revenue up 7.2%. And this has been achieved with no tax increases, relief in customs duty for essential goods, and $11.6 million relief that was given last year to freeze fuel prices at the pump. By maintaining prudent fiscal discipline, the deficit target for 2023-24 has been set at $43 million, down from the 2022-23 estimate of $77 million, with a balanced budget expected for 2024-2025. With positive forecasted increase in revenues, from the expenditure side, the 2023-24 budget can be viewed as a two-year budget, as increased spending levels for current account are set to be frozen at the current year level for the next budget cycle. This is important as the level of current account spending that has been budgeted is realistic to allow the execution of the government's agenda, but it is also necessary for spending discipline to be in place to ensure that we achieve a balanced budget next year. There will also be necessary investments in infrastructure, with capital expenditure both this year and next year being set at $95 million, the highest level in 13 years. Projects will include repaving roads, fare refits, additional housing, a new health clinic in Somerset, 40 new electric buses, upgrades to government IT systems, and the renovation of Francis Patton and Paget primary schools to accommodate 7th and 8th year students, and also investments that are necessary for Tynes Bay. The health and well-being of our residents continue to be a priority for this government, and for the upcoming year, key investments to address quality of life issues will include the provision of additional funding for Bermuda's hospitals, the reintroduction of public health scholarships, and also air quality monitoring for BELCO emissions for affected residents. Our families are the foundation of our society, and we will continue to demonstrate our commitment to appropriately assisting in navigating the very real financial challenges that many are facing in the face of global inflation that is the highest level in 40 years. There is increased funding for child daycare allowances for parents and additional funding for the financial assistance program. Funding is also being provided for our young people who are aging out of the foster care system or care facilities for appropriate transitional living. Our seniors will receive another inflation increase in their pension benefits, and there will be increased funding for care homes. Turning now to government proposals for additional revenue, there are only selected increases in fees and taxes. Based on comparative research with other jurisdictions, taxes on luxury properties will be increased, and this is only going to impact 4% of properties in Bermuda at the higher end. Similarly, court fees are being increased to levels more reflective in other jurisdictions. A 5% revenue uplift has been proposed for stamp duty, trademark fees, solid waste dumping fees, planning fees, shipping fees, and non-passport related immigration fees. New fees will be levied against vacation rental properties, and this fee is to be paid by owners. A nominal fee will now be imposed in relation to patio requests, which do not relate specifically to the provision of personal information of the requestor. And this is an area where significant costs are being incurred by the government. Regulatory fees will also be imposed to address rising compliance costs for regulatory oversight, for which the Registrar of Companies is now required to do to meet new and expanded international, regional, jurisdictional requirements, such as economic substance. It has been well recognized that customs duties do add to the cost of living in Bermuda. The government has sought to provide relief in this area to assist in addressing inflationary pressures by eliminating customs duty on essential goods. Key changes in customs duty next year are as follows. Sugar tax reform will take place where items that may have a small amount of added sugar, such as nutritional bars, low sugar drinks, and non-dairy creamers, will see their customs duty rate reduce. Personal care and fitness companies are now to be exempt from customs duty for upgrades to their businesses, in line with relief that has been provided to hotels, restaurants, and retail establishments for a number of years. And also there's elimination of customs duty for school uniforms and also the importation of aggregate to ensure that we help with the increase in construction costs. Improving tax collection and reverse the trend of accounts receivable is a key focus of this budget. The debt reduction plan will include restrictions on businesses, individual landowners who are not current with their tax obligations or their tax payment plans. These restrictions can include denial of contracts, grants, permits, licenses, passports, or other government authorizations. The government will also work with the Department of Public Prosecutions and the courts to create a pathway for the efficient adjudication of these claims. And it is anticipated in this year's budget that we budgeted for $7.5 billion to be collected in outstanding back taxes. Programs and initiatives to reform government have been ongoing, and it is noteworthy that government employee levels have declined from 4,661 in July 2017 to 4,483 in December of 2022. To ensure that the two-year expenditure target is maintained, ministries and departments will progress ongoing plans to maximize cost effectiveness and efficiencies throughout government. And as I said, those plans have been ongoing and are a part of the annual budget cycle, which is the reason why we've been able to demonstrate cost efficiency over the last few years. As part of its work to provide lower interest rates, the government established a pilot mortgage guarantee program. 12 mortgages have already been approved in the program, with more that are pending. And on April 1st, the program will move into its second phase, allowing more Bermudians to take advantage of these lower rates. As we remove the age restriction, previously it was only Bermudians 40 and below. Now it is open to any Bermudian who can qualify for a mortgage looking to purchase their first home at the Bermuda Commercial Bank. And additionally, public officers will be eligible to transfer their mortgage. As stated from the outset, this budget, which should be framed and viewed in the aspect of a two-year budget from the expenditure side, is based on promoting and sustaining economic growth. It is intended to foster a climate of hope for a better and fair Bermuda. It builds upon the foundation that has already been established over the last 6 years, and it is intended to enhance Bermuda's considerable strengths and enable improvements in areas which have not sufficiently been addressed in the past. Our records show that we keep our promises to provide help and support to Bermudians who need that help and support, while managing this Bermuda's finances in a fiscally prudent manner. It's important to note when it comes to debt reduction, gross debt will fall this year, as we will be repaying $50 million of debt, which is coming due, without the need to refinance that debt due to the solid fiscal performance and management of which we've had, which will see interest rates or interest costs go down next year for the first time in a long time. As I said, this budget builds on the record and it provides a path to continued economic growth, which is vital to ensure that Bermuda has a secure economic future. With that, I'm happy to take any questions on the budget that members of the media may have.
I'm going to start with Jasmine. Jasmine, do you have some questions that you wish to field to the Premier Minister of Finance?
Good afternoon, Mr. Premier.
Good afternoon, Jasmine.
Thank you for your statement. I'm going to take it, I guess, by topic. So in the pre-budget report, you have promised for those earning under $48,000 per year that payroll taxation would be reduced to zero. Why wasn't that met in this budget?
So there's one thing that I want to make sure I clarify in your particular statement. You said in the pre-budget report, we promise. The pre-budget report is just that. It is a consultation document that is put out to make sure that we can put forward ideas, get feedback on ideas, adjust ideas, and go. Whether it was feedback that came in from the general community, whether it was feedback that came through our various consultation meetings, or whether it was feedback, those things are adjusted. Open budgeting is very important to me. As I said at the Chamber of Commerce breakfast this morning, I, along with the former Minister of Finance, Paula Cox, when I was Junior Minister of Finance in 2011, authored the first pre-budget report. Pre-budget reports are made to ensure that all the ideas and thoughts can go out to the public, and there can be detailed deliberation of those ideas. So I reject the notion to say that it was promised. That was what was proposed. When we went back and we looked at the numbers, there were a lot of feedback that came, not just from the business community, but also from individuals that said that the 105,000 figure was possibly too low. And raising, there's people inside of that middle who are, still challenged with increasing costs and mortgages and other places. So we took a look at all of the figures. We said, what will we do? And we ended up in a space where the payroll tax for the lowest level is going to be reduced by 66% this year. So that is still a significant adjustment downwards. And with that and the adjustments to the other bands, we're able to extend the upper limit of payroll tax reductions from 96 where it was previously to 105 where it was proposed to $132,000. So a wider swathe of Bermudians can be subject to payroll tax relief. So it is something that is the way that we look at the pre-budget report. And that's why it's important to note and to understand that you don't want to spring changes in a budget statement and then find yourselves having to possibly adjust that in a narrow window that you have in 4 weeks to get the budget passed. So that's why open budgeting is very important to me. It was very important that we got the pre-budget report out in December to allow the community plenty of time. There was lots of responses that were received via the email box and other things that were specifically related around that payroll tax proposal. So that's what we came out with.
Thank you. I was speaking with the Deputy Chair of Payroll today, and they felt that the consultation period was done too close to the actual budget deadline. Why was it the IT sector consulted sooner?
Well, I would not necessarily accept that because I know that there was also pre-consultation with the international business sector even prior to the release of the pre-budget report, which some of the comments that came from the international business sector were inside of the pre-budget report prior to the pre-budget report even going out. So I don't necessarily accept that. But what I will also accept is that in previous years, the international business sector had complained that the pre-budget report only came out a few weeks before the budget. And this year we made sure that it came out in December to allow plenty of time for persons to digest it. And then for us to have plenty of time for meetings in January before the cabinet finalized its budget plan. So persons may want different things, but in previous times, IB had said, can't release a pre-budget report in January. And this year we released it in December. There was pre-consultation on some of the things that were inside the pre-budget report. There were messages that were sent out to international business and other stakeholder groups even prior to the pre-budget report being released to ask for feedback or thoughts or other things that persons wanted to look forward to. So I think that we did go through a wide-ranging consultation process. And if there is feedback that this process can be done differently in the future, I'm happy to engage with various business groups on that.
And just sticking again with here, increasing payroll taxation on employees, high earners. Do you feel this will upset the relationship that Burt has with the industry and put off potential new job creation, considering it'll be more expensive to hire world-class talent?
I mean, you could say in some cases yes, and in some cases no. That'll be for international business to comment on specifically. And I think that we have to remember that there is a wide variety of international business that is in Bermuda, mainly insurance and reinsurance, but there are a number of various exempted companies in different space and cases and instances. I have some international business that are telling me that the taxes are too low and they're having pressure from their head offices that they are located in a jurisdiction that may not have taxes that, so there's a wide variety of interpretations and views. And that is the reason why we have the International Tax Working Group that is taking into account all of the various views of the international business sector, not just limited parts of it. But I think it's important for us to note that in the 2016 changes that were made by the former government, I think they actually came to place in 2017, payroll taxes used to be the responsibility solely of the employer. They were then changed to have an employer portion and an employee portion that were two separate and distinct entities. I do recognize, as I stated in the budget statement, that there are those businesses that elect to cover their employees' tax liability for whatever reason they choose to do so. But in law, that responsibility does not accrue to the employer. It accrues to the employee. And I do know also with the change in law that happened in 2017, there are many persons who have U.S. tax liability that are now claiming the payroll taxes that are paid as a deduction against their U.S. tax liability. That we do know is happening inside of this economy. What is important for us is to make sure that we follow through with our mantra to make sure that our payroll tax system is more progressive, where we are taxing higher earners at higher rates. What I can say is that the rates that were inside of the actual budget statement were less than the rates that were in the pre-budget statement. Some of those things and changes in addition of bands were results of consultation, which happened not only with the international business community and the business community, but also with feedback which came from local residents, which I had spoken about before. So I believe that it is fair, it is balanced, it is something that is not as sharp as it was as proposed inside the pre-budget report. But I think that it's important that we remember that these are two separate and distinct entities. And it is vital that Bermuda does have a progressive system of taxation from labor income to ensure those persons at the bottom pay less and those persons who can afford to pay more do pay more.
Thank you, Premier. Moving over to Morgan's point, while the renderings look gorgeous, there's been a lot of skepticism about this project, such as why we should put $135 million more taxpayer funds into this property when there's, I'm sure, plenty of hotel companies with a track record of managing these types of properties. Why not look into that avenue?
Well, let me start from the first space, that we are not talking about $135 million of taxpayer funds. So I just want to start there because our budget cannot support that. And that is the reason why there's been a significant amount of work trying to figure out what is the best thing to do with the failed Morgan's Point project. And to answer the second question, if there was a hotel developer that looking to take this off the hands of the government, I'm sure they would have gone to the joint provisional liquidators when the joint provisional liquidators went through that process in looking to get and to secure that. And so I know that it's easy for persons who will see something and say, why did the government do this? Why did the government do that? Why didn't the government do that? And as I had stated in the budget breakfast, which I know that you attended, this is not something that was just, thought of, in the last 2 weeks. This is something that has been going on for the last 2 years, examining the site, examining the options. Hotel options were looked at, residential options for sale were looked at, other options were looked at. And what it came from was what will provide the best return to the taxpayer over time, as what we want to do is to recoup the funds that were lost. That is the key point. And out of all the various analyses that were done, this was seen by the government's financial advisors as the best way to secure a return over time to the government of Bermuda. So when we say $135 million additional going in, it is not $135 million of government funding going in. The fact is that that land, the buildings on that land are going to revert to the government of Bermuda because we are the largest creditor, having paid out $165 million in a guarantee in addition to other items. We will go ahead and put support to make sure that we can finish the project so we can start getting revenue into the company that has been created. But we passed in Parliament a separate company called the Morgan's Point Development Company. That company will have a separate and independent board that will be able to raise its finances and to operate this project and to execute this project. And what is most important is that it has an independent board that is focused on making sure that the best value is extracted from that project. And I have no doubt with the team that has been working on this, with the plans and items which have been laid out, that we will be successful in executing that project. And I look forward to the announcement of the strong independent board that will be overseeing the development of this project.
In terms of that independent board, what guarantees can you give that they'll be able to make decisions on their own? This is a government-led project, stand to be corrected. What are you doing to prevent any political interference in their work?
Well, I can't necessarily say anything that's political interference. The fact is that they are going to be a government board, but under the Companies Act and in the act itself, where it is, all boards have independent actions. And, the danger of which you run, if you try to, interfere with an independent board, then you might end up losing board members. And so that in it itself is a natural check and balance against, those type of interferences itself. The shareholders of the Morgan's Point Company are the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Public Works jointly. That is no different from the Bermuda Land Development Company or WEDCO. I mean, that's the way that these things are set up. So all companies do have shareholders. We hold the shares on behalf of the people of Bermuda. And so, yes, there is the views that will come from the shareholders, but we've already laid out a plan that has been adopted. The law that is passed makes sure that it makes it clear that any types of things have to be blessed by the cabinet as a whole. And so the cabinet as a whole will have the responsibility for ensuring that the project advances to meet the goals of returning as much values to the people of Bermuda. And so it was thorough examination on this particular instance. It went through many different iterations. Things came back, went to Economic Development Committee, certain thoughts went back, came back, went back, and that's it. So this is not something that was just done recently. It's something that has been, that I inherited in the Ministry of Finance from the former Minister of Finance, the work that was being done on this space. But the most important thing is that we are going to transition it to something that is a rain offices to something that will begin to return money to the government of Bermuda, which I think is important.
Do you have a time frame on when you can see money being paid back into this property? I know that you mentioned it would be affordable housing and with a view to offering it to seniors. I presume it's low income. What time frame, what time scale are you putting this on?
With the time scale that has been established for the actual development from cabinet approval to the time that it opened, it's 39 months, which might actually exceed my time in this office. But that much being said, 39 months is the proposal that came towards cabinet from the approval of the cabinet's approval of the project for it to be seen to be open. But remember, that's in phases. So for instance, there's the buildings, the 5 main buildings, which were largely completed already. Those will certainly come on scale a lot sooner. There's other buildings that are partially erected. Those ones may come on scale sooner as well. And then the main new construction, the space in between, which is the amenity village and the 48 residences on top of that, those will be the ones that will certainly take longer. So it's a phased project. And certainly upon the selection of the independent board of the notification, I'm certain that they will have a press conference where we'll be able to go in detail throughout those various policies and proposals. But there has been a significant amount of work done to date. And that's the reason why I can speak about this, because some of us have been living and sleeping and breathing Morgan's Point for some time. And so that's the reason why the cabinet has a high degree of confidence in approving this project so it can go forward.
Sure. And if I may just touch on the national debt.
Absolutely.
Do you have plans to build up reserves to pay off more debt when loans are due in 2026? You mentioned at the budget breakfast this morning, you don't wish for the sinking funds to drop below 100 million. I wonder what your plans were.
Thank you. Based on our current projections right now, there is no projection for the sinking fund to go under $100 million. And the way in which we projected it out, this year, we're going to be retiring $50 million of debt this year. And with the deficit, we'll probably be at around, I want to call it maybe $110 million. If I have my budget book in front of you, I can give you the exact figures. That much being said, we're not intending on going below $100 million. And as next year, we're projecting a balanced budget. The balanced budget means that all interest payments are able to be met out of the money and the revenue which the government of Bermuda takes in to fund its particular operations. So from that perspective, after that, that means that excess funds go into the sinking fund that can be saved as reserves to go ahead and repay the debt. So when we have our refinancing in 2027, there will be funds in the sinking fund. So let's say, for instance, by example, $600 million of debt were coming due in 2027. There'll be money in the sinking fund, so you would not have to refinance the full amount. So the government can make the choice of what, at that point in time, how much money they wish to refinance that time. But yes, there is expected that there will be funds in the sinking fund in order to pay off some of that debt as it comes due, just as there are funds in the sinking fund currently to pay off the $50 million debt coming due this year. The sinking fund balance is around $200 million right now.
Thank you. You mentioned in your statement how your requests, there's going to be a nominal fee. This might be seen by some as an attack on the very principle which it was founded on, and that's free and fair access to information, which was started under the PLP government. Was this decision discussed with the Information Commissioner when consulting them on this change?
I can't necessarily speak to what consultation may not have taken place in the Information Commission. What I can speak to is the broad nature of the policy itself. And the broad nature of the policy is that looking to recover some money. As I said, I gave an example in the budget statement of the significant funds that government departments expend on PADI requests. And it's not just that particular example. There are many departments where work actually stops. So, press might be looking for a press inquiry or other types of things, and literally work in government departments has stopped in order for departments to respond to PADI requests. And so the view is that certainly there needs to be a nominal fee that is attached to these items. It's not for all requests. Certainly when those things get tabled, you'll see the full details, but on the overall basis, when dealing it from a revenue side, it was predicted that there is going to be additional revenue from that, and that revenue will in no way, shape, or form offset the costs of this regime. On broader pattern reform, I think there needs to be broader pattern reform, because I think there is a challenge when government departments literally have to stop work on what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, spend money to bring in consultants to answer PADI requests so that work can continue. And that could not have been the basis and fundamental basis of what was trying to be achieved. I accept that PADI did come from the Progressive Labour Party. I'm proud of PADI that comes from the Progressive Labour Party. I believe that PADI can work. But at the same point in time, we also have to recognize that responding to requests does cost a significant amount of money, and it does take resources. And in all things which happen, you do need to make sure that appropriate fees are charged for the provision of those services.
Jasmine, we are mindful of time.
Thank you.
Mr.
Good afternoon, Premier.
Good afternoon.
It's a pleasure. Looked at a rough guide this morning, didn't you, at the business breakfast, just sharper, Whiteman, the compass were quite critical at the start, just the sharper one. He said that the changes you introduced to the tax structure could put up business costs by 20%. Is he correct?
That would be his opinion. What I have stated inside of this budget is that there is no increase to any employer payroll tax liability. And that is something that was not what was stated in the pre-budget report, but is something that was delivered in this particular budget. And so from that perspective, that may be his opinion. And I think that persons in the international business community can comment on it. But from a government's perspective, we have not increased the tax burden for employer payroll taxes that are due from employers under law.
He's one of the most important businessmen in the country, and he represents the key sector of the economy. He's saying that what he's done is going to increase business costs by 20%. Are you saying he's wrong?
That's what you are saying. I'm saying that the government has laid out a budget that does not increase the payroll tax liability for any business in this country. Employer payroll taxes are separate and distinct from employee payroll taxes. And as it's spelled out inside of this budget, there are different companies that treat different ways. I happen to know, if you were talking about Mr. Chris Shapier, there are companies in ABIR that do not pay their employee payroll taxes. So it does not apply across the board. There are some impacts for some companies, which may be different for others. But what I must say, and this is the most important fundamental point, that unlike where in the pre-budget report, there was a proposed increase from 10.25% to 10.75% for exempted companies, which cover not only ABIR, but the wide range of exempted companies in Bermuda. There has been no change to that payroll tax liability, and that amount has stayed at 10.25%.
Under your leadership, we've become one bigger economy, haven't we? Just international business. And by the comments from Mr. Chapa and Whiteman and the Chamber of Commerce, you've lost the confidence in international business.
If that's your opinion, then you can say that. That's not what I'm going to say. What I can say is that international business has continued to grow underneath this government successfully. We have rattled off the figures that showed international business expanding at its fastest rate in 2021, with continued jobs becoming added to international business. In regards to the decline of tourism, I can certainly accept that. That's what happens after a pandemic and the closure of your largest hotel. But that is work that we have to do, and that is work that we will continue to do.
Mr. Whiteman, from PwC, he said that poverty levels on the island were significantly above 20%. Would you agree with that?
I'm not to say whether I agree or disagree with Mr. Whiteman's figures of which he's raised.
Significantly above 20% people living below the poverty line. I mean, your Premier, does that make you feel any shame? How do you feel about it?
Well, first of all, you're coming from a premise that I will accept such statistics. But here's what I tell you, what I will accept. What I will accept is that in this country, we need to provide relief for working persons. And in this country, since I have been the Premier of this country, working people have seen their tax liability significantly reduced under this particular government. In addition to that significant reduction, has been a significant increase in the provision of services. So whatever statements you may want me to respond to, I'm not going to respond to someone else's. I'm going to state the facts. And the facts are, if you look at the history of what this government has managed to do, especially when it comes to the provision of payroll taxes and payroll tax relief, a worker making $48,000 a year would have been $7,000 combined better off over that time than if the Progressive Labor Party was not in government. And someone on median incomes at $66,000 would have been $4,500 better off. That is the record of this government, and that is how you address those particular issues, by making sure that you can provide relief to working people, and that is what this government has done.
Maybe in response to the Chamber of Commerce, they're concerned about the debt levels under your government. They describe the levels of debt as a sort of Damocles hovering above the economy in Ireland. Are they correct?
Well, here's what I would say. I think that is very interesting when we speak about the debt under my government, as you placed it. And it's important to remember that this was before your time, Mr. Connolly, but the first time that I delivered a budget statement in 2018 as Minister of Finance, the entire international business community and business community expected me to raise the debt ceiling. We did not raise the debt ceiling. We were able to keep that debt at $2.5 billion. And the only reason that the debt ceiling in this country was raised was because of the One Bermuda Alliance's failed Morgan's Point project and then a once-in-a-century pandemic. So, of course, debt levels are an absolute concern. But here's the thing, Mr. Connolly. We are reducing our debt this year by repaying $50 million of debt that is becoming due that we are not refinancing. And that repayment of debt is going to see our interest costs go down next year. And with a balanced budget, we are going to continue to see a reduction of interest rates over time. That is the path to sustain economic growth, which we have laid out and which we are delivering.
So the Chamber of Commerce say it's a sort of Damocles above the economy. Do you agree with them or not?
What I'm not going to say whether I agree or disagree with the statements which other people make, that's for them. What I can state to you are the facts. And the facts are that this year we will be repaying $50 million of debt that is coming due because we have sufficient reserves in which to do so. And that is going to reduce our interest costs next year.
On Morgan's point, obviously, it's quite a long budget, 2.5 hours, for a few things. You said, quote, our present assumptions on financing consist of two debt tranches, a combination of a senior debt tranche secured against Morgan's Point. Is that the government debt tranche? How much is it for? And, which part of Morgan's Point is actually affected?
Well, it can only be a debt tranche over the land that the government will own. And as you follow the debate in the House of Assembly, remarkably, the former government extended a $165 million guarantee and did not extend a $165 million guarantee over the totality of the land. So the government does not even own all the land that was part of the land swap. So it would only be on the land at which the government may ultimately control.
Could you just explain in detail the funding and the guarantees? I mean, how would that?
No, I cannot. Not at this time. That would be something that will be most best done by the independent board when they finalize the arrangements that will be done. And once those matters are approved by cabinet, I'll be happy to share them with you. But those matters have not yet been approved by cabinet. What has been approved is the plan to go forward in phase one. And as I said inside of the budget statement, all of those things will yet to be determined, but we've given an outline of what has been presented to the cabinet and what the cabinet does expect.
What's the wise to announce it? You don't have the details.
I think that we sufficiently know the details and the direction in which we're going forward. You're asking Mr. Connolly for specific details on debt tranches, which I've told you will not yet be done until those matters are agreed.
What is the currently, what is the government's total commitment in terms of guarantees now, including the hospital?
That figure would be printed in the budget book.
You don't know that?
It would be printed in the budget book. I'm happy to go look at the budget book and tell you, but you can read it for yourself, Mr. Connolly.
Okay, that's fine. During your speech, you said that in 2018, the government agreed to provide the hospital with 322 million funding each year, but never honoured this promise. Please quantify the total shortfall from and including 2018, and why was this promise never kept? What was the money used for instead?
The money was not used for anything. It just wasn't given to the hospital. But you have to remember $322 million of combined funding. You were at the budget breakfast this morning, so I'm sure you heard my explanation, but I'll repeat it today for the benefit of everyone else. Combined funding not only comes from the money of which the government gives insofar as subsidy, which has always been paid, but it's also the amount of money that comes from the reinsurance fund. And the neutral reinsurance fund comes from the amount of people that are insured in the economy. When you have a once-in-a-century pandemic, there's a whole lot of people who will fall out of work. And that means that they are not covered by health insurance, which means that there is a gap of payment. So it's not a question of direct payments from the government. Payments were made. It is the shortfall, which comes from the combined sources, mutual reinsurance fund, and also government subsidies. And those items have had a gap. We have been able to top it up, but over time, those funds have not always been met. And that is the reason why this year we are providing a $15 million additional payment, and we are increasing the subsidy payments next year.
Okay, finally, there were some changes to banking rules. Are you one of the two PLP premiers that Mr. Burt said had their accounts shut down under your plan?
Would you like me to send a transfer to you from Butterfield tomorrow? I'll happily do so.
Please do, that would be lovely.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yes,
So
hopefully I'll be able to, to reverse the money and take the money out of your account.
yeah, so what was Mr. Burt speaking about then?
Mr. Connolly, we're here about to talk about the budget. I'm not going to talk about individual comments that are made by members of the House Assembly, or else we'll be here all day.
He's a senior government MP.
That's fine.
So who are the two PLP premiers that you?
Mr. Connolly, I'm not sure there's a reason why you're pressing on this when I'm sure there's people in the country who want to listen to matters related to the budget. Does the Royal Gazette have any further questions related to the budget? Doesn't. Then we're okay. I'm happy that I've been able to answer all of your budget-related questions, Mr. Connolly. Feel free to write down your account number and I'll send you a transfer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Connolly. Thank you, Jasmine. We really appreciate your participation today. That concludes today's press briefing.
Thank you. Take care.